Today's episode is sponsored by Ellie, Ellii.
Ellie is one of the world's leading content libraries for English language teachers, with thousands of ready-made lessons and flashcards and hundreds of videos that you can use to complement your own curriculum or use as your main source of materials.
Ellie is run by a team of former English teachers, dedicated to creating content that engages your language learners.
If you're an independent teacher or paying for your materials out of pocket, we invite you to use our podcast's exclusive discount code Think-Aloud to save 15% off your first membership term. That's THINKALOUD.
And if you're an administrator looking to buy for your whole program, just reach out to the fine folks at Ellie to inquire about a 2-month free trial to test it out for your organization. And don't forget to mention who sent you, your friends at the Teacher Think-Aloud podcast.
Head to ellie.com today. That's ELLII.com.
Hello, and welcome to the Teacher Think-Aloud podcast, a podcast for reflective practice for teachers of English around the world.
I'm your co-host, Shay.
And I'm Anna.
And today, we're picking up our conversation with our friends at the DIESOL Podcast.
That's right. A few weeks ago, we released part 1 of our conversation about what it means to be a reflective practitioner. We covered some of the foundational theories of reflective practice, and we talked extensively about why we should reflect and how we can make reflection meaningful. And now, in part 2, we're shifting our focus to practical strategies and tools for reflection.
Yes, definitely make your way to part 1 of the conversation if you hadn't had a chance yet. And if you did have a chance to listen to part 1, you know that it was produced by DIESOL in their signature format.
And what you're about to listen to will be in our signature narrative style.
Which just means more interruptions, really. Just kidding. We'll pause and reflect at different points of the conversation, and we invite you to join us.
Let's meet Brent and Ixchell and pick up where we left off.
My name is Brent Warner. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a professor of ESL at Irvine Valley College in Southern California.
My name is Ixchell Reyes. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a teacher trainer and an English for special purposes instructor. So not all reflection happens during scheduled planning time. Sometimes we get sudden flashbacks in those in-between moments, like we're walking to our car or we're cooking dinner and suddenly reliving parts of a lesson, oftentimes at night, right? Can you recall one of those unplanned golden moments and how it compares to structured reflection?
You know, Ixchell, you mentioned at night you're reliving parts of a lesson. My brain has a really hard time turning off. So often my best ideas come to me when I'm dreaming. I run through whole classes in my brain. I don't know if they're dreams or my subconscious sort of working things out, but a lot of the time I'll wake up and I'll be like, okay, I know what I'm going to do. That sort of subconscious reflection is very different than when you're awake, right? So I don't know that I have anything more specific than that, but this idea of reliving parts of a lesson, I think we take it a step further, and sometimes we're teaching while we're sleeping. I don't know how healthy that is. Maybe I need
probably
some
not very.
That's why
Anna. Yeah.
Work-life
Never
balance
stop working.
out the window. Maybe that's another argument for making reflection intentional. I mean, I do think that those are golden moments right there, right? Just getting inspiration in a dream and waking up and having that inspiration. I think that's a wonderful way to get ideas. Some of the best ideas come from not a moment when you are explicitly trying to work through that problem, right? But I do think setting aside time to reflect can help lessen the dreams, nightmares about teaching, perhaps, by letting you process it in a moment when you are able to just sit down and think through it. Just a thought.
What about you? I'm going to throw the question back at you.
I have insomnia. I love reflecting, and I love teaching about reflection and how it transforms the way you approach things, right? And oftentimes in the middle of the night, I won't have a dream, but I'll wake up and think, oh my goodness, that's the thing I need to do tomorrow. It didn't come in a dream. It came moments after I woke up. And then I have to get up and get whatever I was going to do or write it down because I'll forget. It happens to me all the time. And those are my golden moments because I've had amazing things probably wouldn't have thought at the end of the day when I'm decompressing, or my reflection at the end of the week.
Your brain has more space to breathe and the creativity is awakened. And I am a major procrastinator, much to Anna's chagrin, being my business partner, I think. But I think that my brain works best under pressure. The 10 minutes before class starts, I'm going to have that idea that's going to change everything. Damn it, why couldn't you have come to me last night when I was prepping? Or even an hour ago and make this more manageable?
That's the same for me. Like every time I'm at a presentation, it's like, oh, I'm not watching anybody else's sessions because I'm completely redesigning the entire presentation,
Yes.
30 minutes before we go on. And that happens in classes as well.
We're really
for
fun
me,
to work with.
right, I know people love it. The thing for me is stepping out and doing things that are not teaching related. It could be as simple as going on a walk, spending time in nature, or, it can't be where I'm like distracted. Like going to the movies doesn't help me with this stuff, but going out and just letting my brain wander. I know there's like a psychological phenomenon for this. Coming back to, the last time we talked about Abbott Elementary, now I'll talk about 30 Rock. One of the episodes in 30 Rock was Alec Baldwin. He was doing putt-putt golf in his office, and he's talking about like how doing things like that are about pulling your brain out of the focus that it's trying to work on, and then it gives room for ideas to come in. That's always resonated with me. You can't be overly focused. You won't create as good work if you're always in it, right? And so that time to give yourself and get out of it and get your head in your own space. I know does like running and all these things and like trying to get the fresh head thing, right? So whether it's yoga or whatever else it is, it's like that time where your brain is not doing and not active really helps me more aha moments as well.
I think a hybrid approach, neither formal nor spontaneous reflection, is better than the other necessarily, but just knowing where that sort of fertile ground for creativity exists in you and knowing yourself. Maybe you go on a hike, but you sort of preface the hike by saying, here's something that's on my mind, and can I allow that to be sort of like a more structured creative hike? I don't know, maybe that's a little too woo-woo, but kind of a combination of the two.
Yeah, if you have one idea but even if you not force it, you just tell yourself, let this hang out and see what happens. It could still work out. I also have my own openness to woo-woo opportunities as well. And it's like, okay, let's see what happens with that. It's just slight intention added on to whatever you're doing without necessarily a focused goal. I think that would work well too.
Well, and I like that you brought up the word intention again, because I think that intention and then creating the space, right? Creating space in your brain for reflection, whether that is just saying, okay, I'm going to leave it and I'm going to let my brain wander into a different area and not focus on this, or creating actual space in your day. Because if we're relying only on like the lesson is happening, I am here, I got to go to my next class, right? That's not necessarily going to get us where we need to go. Teachers are burnt out. A lot of times that is all we have. But if we're able to kind of build in that creative space by going on a walk, going on a run, doing something that takes us away from it, or creating a space where we sit down and we just let ourselves free write about whatever we just did in class or what we did throughout the week. It doesn't have to be a session by session. That's really important. We call it, within the realm of reflective practice, we call this reflection in action versus reflection on action. So reflection in action being that in the moment practice. We are shifting our lessons as we go along. We're making, mental notes about things, but building in that reflection on action right after the fact, whichever form it takes, is key to building that practice. In our first episode, go back and listen to episode 1, everybody, if you haven't. In our first episode, we talked about reflective practice as a practice. That reflective practice component is building in some form of reflection on action after the fact. Yeah.
Right.
And that's the hardest part, right? We all pivot in the classroom when we need to. We notice when students, eyes are glazed over and we've lost them. We change. We have to. We've been trained to do that. But this idea of pausing after the fact, carving out that time for what happened and why is really the key component. And I think the hardest to really make space for.
So one of the things I often tell my teacher trainees is that, yes, we're reflecting on what has happened, but it also should be a point that helps you to plan or see what might be next, right?
Yeah.
Well, how do you guys use reflection to make small tweaks for either following lesson? I know you mentioned suddenly in your dreams you get the answer, but what about bigger long-term goals?
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so you've just described another type of reflection, Ixchell, reflection for action, which is essentially based on what has, what I've seen or what I've done, what's next. And previously, Anna, you and I have talked about reflection in action or on action, but there's actually another preposition because English is just that fun with prepositions.
Yeah.
Yeah, reflection for action. So it's exactly that, Ixchell. So, I mean, if we're thinking about longer term professional goals, the idea is to break that down into smaller, manageable chunks. The name of the game for reflection is making it the least intimidating as possible, right? Because it's already, we've got all of our classes, we've got our evaluations, we've got to do observations, we have our PD. And so reflection, I think for a lot of teachers can feel like yet another thing that, I'm being encouraged to do. So first it's like, we'll go back to that framing, right? That it is this opportunity to learn yourself. So frame it that way. But then also use it to your advantage. What is it, let's say, let's not go too crazy. Let's say a year from now, what's one thing you'd like to see change within your teaching practice? And then start to break it down into smaller chunks. Backwards engineering, how to get to that end goal, working backwards.
Well, yeah, I'm just thinking because you and I, Shay, at TESOL 2025, our whole session was on essentially building reflection into
scrambling. That's
our
right. We
professional
did that.
development, right? Like,
You're like, oh, I'm an expert on this. I forgot.
Wait a second.
right. Using reflection as a tool for goal setting, the workshop we did was really focused on goal setting. The whole process of that workshop was figuring out what reflective practice is and then focusing on how to make it actionable. And what we did with participants in that workshop was have them reflect on how they reflect best. We'll talk about strategies in a minute here for reflection. But then the end piece there was we had them set a goal for the conference, right? The next couple of days, a month from now, a year from now, and 5 years from now. All of that coming out of reflection. The focus was using reflection to figure out areas of professional development they want to pursue and target, right? So I think that's exactly what you were saying, Shay, just unbeknownst to you. We'd already talked about this. We talked about SMART goals. I mean, who's not going to talk about SMART goals for everything, but breaking it down, making it time bound, making it relevant was really, that's the way that I think works best. At least that's how we presented it to people. Different people work differently. So they might decide that in their reflective practice, they want to structure their reflection so that they answer the same 3 questions each time. What went well? What wasn't so great? And what do I want to change next time? Or maybe add on to that. What is it that I want to pursue to become a stronger teacher in this area, right? So I think the questions you lay out for yourself, you can create your own rubric. Each teacher is going to want to ask themselves different questions. So it really is about shaping the questions that you ask yourself in your own reflection and figuring out what system works best for you.
Yeah. And I'd also add, like, we've all got long careers ahead of us. So it's not that you have to get it right the first time, right? It's a iterative process. And you start saying, hey, this part worked for me. I didn't really, vibe with these questions or these ideas. I'm going to ditch them, but I'm going to turn into my own thing here. And so that ability to say it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just about taking those steps to move into it. I think for so many of us as teachers, it's like, I got to get it right the first time, right? Or it's that perfectionism thing that comes in or whatever. And so the ability to let go of that and say, let me get this part here. Let me test it out. If I don't like it, it doesn't mean the whole thing's a failure. It means that this is an aligning for me. Let me try the next step or version, especially if it's not a huge amount of time. It's not like I got to spend an hour every day after my classes doing this stuff or whatever else it is, right? And you can really bring that quite down to get yourself started.
I appreciate Bren's point that creating a reflective practice means being iterative and finding out what works best for you might take some time.
I think one of the greatest perks of establishing a reflective teaching practice is that you're carving out specific time to focus on your practice, on your interests, and needs as a professional. Sometimes, life gets in the way of you time.
Mm.
And while I'm not condoning reflection on your teaching as your primary form of self-care,
Yeah.
I think there's value in spending time with yourself in that way.
Absolutely. Well, now that I remember that I presented at TESOL this year, oh my gosh, I traveled to like 5 countries in 2 months right around time for work.
Yeah, I mean, it's no wonder you didn't remember it.
Yeah, it was just a total blur, but thankfully I have you to remind me of things, Anna. Well, I remember this comment from one of our workshop attendees who told me that she had been teaching for nearly 50 years. And in that time, she had never thought that PD could be for her. That now she hopes to share that more positive framing with her trainee teachers.
Yeah, I do think many teachers get stuck in that kind of thinking, that it's just another task for them to tick off rather than having the space to see value in PD.
And I think that value is especially apparent within the context of self-directed PD, which is really our jam.
Yeah, our jam. So let's dive a little deeper into some of the guiding questions we ask teachers to get them closer to that headspace.
Yeah, one of our leading questions for teachers is how much time realistically do you have to devote to PD? That's a really important starting place because, I remember, and Anna and I, during the pandemic, we launched this podcast, but you all remember everything went online. Everyone was like, we can do this webinar and that. We tried to join everything we possibly could in that first month of the pandemic. And we realized really quickly, like, this is not sustainable. Like, I'm tired and I'm not even leaving my house. What's going on? So I think being really honest with yourself, your bandwidth, looking at your life from a holistic perspective and saying, Anna, for example, has already used you, but you have a 1-year-old. That's really challenging. Your time is different than it was before you had that child, right? And not just parents, but your emotional state. Maybe you moved to a new city. Maybe you had a loss in your family. All of that impacts your professional capacity. And we're not machines. And I think we have to remind ourselves of that sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Shay, you hit the nail on the head. The first step in using reflection to direct our professional development is figuring out what goals are feasible, how much time we have, but then also thinking about how do I want to structure my own practice? And then also, what are the ways that I learn best, right? Our audience at our TESOL workshop came up with a lot of different options for things they do, and it's going to be different for everybody. Journaling is a huge one. It doesn't have to be an essay every time. It can be bullet points. Having a rubric where you just simply keep in check how things went during a lesson or over the course of the week. One person in our workshop was a big fan of voice memos because it's a quicker and easier way of saying what's on your mind and not having to craft it into written form, which can feel very formal. But the most important thing really is trying to build a routine, whatever that looks like, thinking of your bandwidth. How often am I going to do this? How am I going to remember to do this? Calendar notifications, time boxing. This is the time I reflect each week or each day, scheduling prompts to send to ourselves with a question. What was the teacher talk time like during your lesson today? And scheduling that prompt to pop up on your phone at X time of day. So you can take a quick moment to be like, oh yeah, well, I guess this person talked a lot and I talked a lot during that segment, whatever it is, just to prompt yourself to do it because we're busy people and we need some kind of external support to help build that routine. And those are just some simple ways. But since we're on the DIESOL podcast, I'm also curious, if you two have any ideas for these kinds of formats. How could we integrate tech into reflection?
Yeah.
Does tech even have a place in reflection? We've been talking very woo-woo. Like, is tech part of this conversation? Yes or no? I'm interested in your thoughts.
So again, as a pre-service teacher trainer, I have my students, you talked about emails and journals, but I like a tool called, it's kind of an old, very simple rudimentary website. It's called dearfutureme.org.
Future me. I say this.
Is it Dear Future Me or just Future Me?
I think it's just futureme.org.
Future Me. Yeah.
Cool.
And I like it because you're reflecting, but you're also talking to the future. You don't need to enter anything except your email. You'll forget about it. I have my students, as they're finishing the course and they're like nervous about going back to their nation and starting this journey, right? And one of the things I tell them is you've got to be gentle with yourself. You've got to be kind because there's going to be many challenging moments, right? And I want my teachers, anybody from my training to have longevity. We need good teachers
Mhm.
that don't quit after 3 years or 5 years, right? We already have
Mhm.
enough challenges in our ESL field.
Mhm.
Talk to your past self, talk to your future
Mhm.
self, and schedule that email. You'll forget about it. Schedule it to the very last day when they graduate. And on that last day, they say, "Oh, I got a funny email today." "Oh, from who?" "From myself." And so inevitably, someone will schedule it for a year later
Oh,
because they
that's
forget to
great.
change the year.
Mhm.
And I'll get an email a year later. "Teacher, miss, I got this email and I can't
Oh.
believe it." And some of them have cried. They've told me stories of how they thought they couldn't teach English, but now they look back and they realize how important it is to,
Mm.
again, reflect. I think that's a big part of my methodology. I like it to be simple. Because of that, it is overwhelming. And so futureme.org is not a calendar reminder. It's not going to pop it. You just write it down or write 2 sentences. I say whatever you want to write down. A poem, a word, 3 adjectives, write it.
I love it.
Mm.
And
Oh, it's so feel good too. I
Mhm.
Yeah.
feel all warm and fuzzy right now.
Mhm.
And future me is great for assignments too, right? Because
Mhm.
the reflection piece and like, hey, what do you think you're going to get done by this time? So it works
Mhm.
for students, but it also works for us as teachers to consider, what are we doing? What are we thinking about? What are we wanting to get done?
Mhm.
I would say for me, in terms of like the tech, there's a ton that can be really powerful. So I think everybody who's listening probably did their teacher training in a time when you could get at least a video camera going, right? Watch, like,
Mm.
recording yourself teaching, like
Mhm.
doing the
Mhm.
actual
Yes.
process. Now, you're like, oh my God, am I going to do this thing, right? Am I going to watch myself? But I will say that the times that I've done it have been really high value turnaround. And so it's like, do I have to watch myself? Do I have to criticize, whatever it is? But at the same
Yeah.
time, you're like, okay,
Mhm.
just having that video, being able to sit down and separate yourself from the moment and look at that is a huge one. So that, and it's so easy because you can just set up your phone in the corner at this point,
Hey,
back in
Brent,
yeah,
when was the last time you recorded your lesson?
it's been a while. So I was actually thinking about that now. And I'm like, because it's that intimidation factor. And you're just
Yeah.
like, I have recorded myself doing presentations and gone back on the presentations, but my classroom teaching I haven't done for a little while, and I do need to. But I will also throw in, this is a non-tech one that a friend of mine, when I got early into like the PD stuff, shared this idea with me. I just thought it was so cool. I've only done it once, but it was really interesting. Very low tech. Have someone come into the room to observe you, and their total
Yes.
observation is this is a different kind of observation. Their job is they have a map of the room and they have a pen and they just trace where you walk during your teaching time in the class. And it's like, where are you spending your time? Where are you moving? And all they do is just trace you for 30, 45 minutes, whatever. And they show
Mm.
on the map, and then you get a sense of how you actually move, who you're paying attention to in the class, who you're ignoring, what the reasons for that might be. It might just be because it's hard to walk behind one of the students, or it might be because you have a bias against that student, or whatever else is going on, right? And so I thought that was a really, one of the most innovative ways to understand your process and your relationship with the physical classroom, which is just a really powerful way of understanding. And then the third one for tech I would talk about is the chatbot reflection, talking to AI, putting in your intentions. You can set it up, of course, to say things like, hey, just be Socrative, just ask questions, don't give me feedback on my responses directly, but play the role of a considerate listener, right? And you can ask follow-up questions, etc., but not really like, oh, you're such a brilliant person for thinking of that, like these kind of nasty things that it does, and gives you a false sense of power or confidence that isn't necessarily deserved, when you're really just trying to figure out what's going on, right? The goal is different here. One video I've always wanted to make and I haven't made it is, if you're commuting to work, put your phone on the dashboard and have it be your chat partner that you can talk to while you're on your road to class. And so one of the ways that you can actually reflect with
Cool.
that, you're put in your lesson plan from the last time and just say, let's talk about how it went, right? Let's have the conversation. This was the lesson plan. Maybe if it works out, you could say, these were some of what my students said about it, just going to pop it in there as text. And then later I'll move into the voice mode on ChatGPT or whatever, and then we'll just talk about it on the drive. So you can use your driving time to talk about that as well. So there's lots of room for tech in there.
Time
I'd
saving
throw
trick.
one
Yeah.
more in there. Ooh, that
Yes.
just reminded me of Marco Polo. I don't know if you guys have heard of Marco Polo.
Oh, I used that.
Yeah.
Oh, so much. Yeah.
Okay, so Marco Polo, my sister and I live in different states, and I am always talking about my students to her. She's also a teacher, but she works with preschoolers. I work with adults. It has helped me tremendously, and I didn't think of it that I'm already using it. I'll tell her an idea. She doesn't respond because essentially Marco Polo is you record a video, somebody else is going to receive it, and they can watch whenever they want. It's like this video stream, and it gives you the time to think and listen without responding in a conversation or a video call. It doesn't mix text messages, so you don't have to go search for that video. So you end up becoming a better listener, and you're not able to respond right away. You're able to actually think. Oftentimes, I'll run an idea by her because sometimes preschoolers have similar behaviors.
100%.
Adults, etc., vice versa. So later on, I'll get the answer myself, and I do that when I'm driving, safely, and I'll just be talking, and we just chat back and forth, and then I'll listen and get an idea. So that actually is how I've reflected many times. I didn't realize I was doing it. So Marco Polo is free, and it works well for that, actually.
Yeah.
And it's not as intimidating as recording yourself and looking at your face.
Yeah. I love that. And I love the asynchronicity of that, that forced pause. It's great.
Well, I mean, maybe we'll get to this in a second, but you're making me think of just the importance of an accountability partner, right?
A sounding board.
A sounding board. That's how Shay and I came to be. We were accountability partners. We were working in the same intensive English program in New York City at the time, and we just started doing that in person. I love that you're using tech for making that collective reflection with your sister, even though it was different learners. Yeah.
And speaking of accountability partners, Brent and I worked together at some point, and I remember when I had this goal of going 70% paperless. I went semester by semester. Okay, let me see what I can turn into paperless and digital without compromising the content of my class. I would always say, guess what? I've done this, and but he was and he still is my accountability partner.
Yeah. And now you have a podcast, and other people are also benefiting from you guys reflecting together, essentially. That's awesome.
I mean, that's the big secret about a podcast, right? When you run the podcast, you're getting the benefit of all the PD that you're building and sharing with everybody.
That's right.
100%.
Right.
I just want to highlight for listeners that we've added the tech tools mentioned here to this episode's show notes. And since this conversation, Shay and I have been throwing around a few more ideas for tech-enabled reflection. Want to share a few, Shay?
Yeah. Well, something I noticed when I was teaching in China last year was that I had this desire, especially after a tough class, to have a colleague right there to bounce ideas off of.
This burning desire.
Burning.
Yes, absolutely. That moment of what just happened in there, and no one's around to process with you. I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was lucky enough to be teaching next door to my partner, but a chatbot can serve that purpose too. Not to replace colleagues, of course, but as a reflective partner. And it can be something as simple as pasting a short note from your lesson into ChatGPT, for example, or another tool, and asking, what might I do differently next time?
All right. So like a critical friend, one who's always available and doesn't get tired of your rambling and your insecurities, right?
Yes. And, they can generate reflective questions too. So say you had a group discussion that just fell flat. You could ask the AI, give me some questions to help me reflect on why that didn't work. And then it comes back to you with prompts like, well, how did my instructions shape the outcome? Were the students clear on their roles and their purpose in the activities?
I love that. That feels powerful, especially for new teachers who don't yet know what to ask themselves and maybe, don't have that person to talk to right next to them. The chatbot helps them move from that didn't work to here's what I can learn from it.
Yeah. And for more experienced teachers, you can ask the chatbot to play sort of the devil's advocate. For example, you could say, push back on how I used group work in this lesson. That kind of challenge can help to surface blind spots that we might not notice ourselves.
But I mean, then what about evidence, though, right? Because reflection isn't just feelings, right? It's also about looking at what actually happened in the classroom.
You're right. It isn't just feelings. I think people maybe get hung up on that idea. It's like, how did that
Mm.
feel to me? But it's more than that. And so for me, that's where transcription tools come into play. So you
Mm.
could record, a 10-minute activity, run it through an auto transcriber, and then suddenly you see the classroom talk, right?
Cool.
Maybe you notice that you're speaking 80% of the time, or maybe you notice even that your questions are mostly closed questions as opposed to open-ended.
Yeah, I also love that that doesn't involve like video necessarily, right? Because you're kind of getting that feel of the classroom and some input from the classroom without, putting yourself and putting your students on the spot with a video.
Sure, yeah.
But I mean, I think that would really be a wake-up call. And for someone newer to reflection, they could start with just teacher talk versus student talk. But for someone more advanced, they might look at tone and wait time and how students take up each other's ideas. There's so much.
Right, right. And, once you've got those transcripts or those journal entries, data analysis tools can help. So instead of combing through, say, 20 reflections that you took over the course of the semester, you can ask your generative AI to find recurring themes. Like maybe you highlighted pacing issues or student engagement, maybe dropping or sort of going off the rails during tech use.
Yeah, so it's not just one snapshot, but trends over time.
And that's where a tool like Notebook LM really shines. That's one of my favorites. You can upload a whole semester's worth of plans, reflections, and even transcripts. You can ask it questions to sort of drill down on certain components or curiosities that you have, which is a really cool feature. But what I love most is what it can do at the macro level. The tool surfaces patterns with its overview functions, including both audio and video overviews. Like it generates them based on the content you feed it. And it also generates things like mind maps and FAQs. Et cetera.
That sounds like a really cool bird's eye view teachers rarely have time to create on their own. Yeah, gives you perspective. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to be clear, because I know I've gotten like super excited talking about these tools. Like I started this and I was like, Anna, I'm sick. My voice is going to be awful. Now I'm like sweaty and excited. Here we are again. Well, even though I'm excited, there's a lot that you can do. None of this is replacing human reflection or mentoring. But I think it does help to extend it. We can think of AI as a sort of scaffolding in the reflection process. It's asking the questions, it's surfacing the patterns, and it's giving us sort of a head start so that our deeper thinking can really kick in.
So in a way, generative AI in this case can help us spend less time finding the reflection questions and more time answering those questions. And you've always got someone to reflect with.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, of course, we do want to consider the other side of the coin too. We can't be reckless in how we're engaging with AI. We have to be, careful, mindful of what we're sharing, especially if we're, adding any sort of student information, demographic information. We want to make sure we're protecting our identities and our students and that we're adhering to guidelines provided to us by our institutions.
Right. And just our moral compass, right? So very important. And as you alluded to a moment ago, no AI can beat reflecting with a real live human. So let's hear more about how to facilitate shared reflection.
We've talked a lot about individual reflection and we've started to move into accountability partners. I'm just trying to think of, are there other collective reflection avenues we could discuss? Are you guys involved in groups like professional learning networks or communities? Have you ever participated in sort of a mentor relationship? You are mentoring teachers. Tell us a bit about that.
Both of us have been deeply involved in DIESOL. Both of us were doing a lot of work around there. Tex DIESOL when she moved to Texas. I've been heavily involved with Q. So Q is ISTE. So Q in California is the big one for ed tech related things, not language related, but ed tech. My book just came out for ISTE, so that's a language related thing. I'm kind of tying into that community more. So yeah, being part of those learning communities. And then back when Twitter and teacher Twitter was a great thing, highly involved with that as well. Like really trying, getting a lot of value.
The micro chats.
Yeah, the like all of those things were so powerful. It's a real true loss. I used to tell people, and people get a little bit upset with me about it, but I would say like, oh, I learned more from Twitter than I did from my master's program.
Yeah.
There are so many
Definitely.
people sharing so many great things, and it's a true tangible loss to not have that community anymore. We mourned it on an episode when both of us decided to step away.
I remember
Um,
that episode.
But, you know, at the same time, there are ways to connect with people, share ideas. I spend more time on LinkedIn for my digital communities now. It's fine to go a little bit smaller. It's fine to kind of work with your little crew and your team. You don't have to be out there blasting all the time. It can be, you know, individual local communities. And so I find that I have these really powerful conversations one-on-one with people quite a lot just over coffee or something like that too. So I do maintain some level of connection, although I'll say like in the last 6 months or 8 months or so, it's been a little stressful and hard to just be like, okay, I need my own space. And it's okay to step in and out of these things too. So I
Yeah.
think that's
And
important.
I would say that I was so involved online with technology, PLNs online, that there came a point, probably marked with what I call the death of Twitter, the very hard death of Twitter. But that didn't mean I couldn't create my own PLN. I remember talking to Brent about that. I felt so disconnected and like I wasn't growing. But I also realized that I did have plenty of people around me, not necessarily my colleagues where I work, but people that I'd met through other places. And I had to make the effort to say, hey guys, we really want to talk about AI and know your perspective. And so I have like about 5 colleagues that on and off I'll bounce ideas with. And that's a PLN. I also do
Right.
include people that may not think the same as me. I'm very much
Mm.
into technology and educational technology and just innovation and trying to get innovation even in a low tech environment. And so oftentimes that means I have to stay connected to people who aren't, you know, the ed tech, what do you call them? The people who, I forgot, I'm tired today.
Non-techies. Well,
The
we can call them non-techies. I don't know.
Nice word.
Won so many people over because it was like little by little, and then they started coming, and then sort of like finding their way with something now that you can't really escape technology. So again, staying connected with people that you might find common ground with.
Yeah.
I'm lost in our notes right now. I'm like, okay, we have jumped all over. Everyone's really tired. I'm sure my eyes are getting pretty heavy. So I wonder, Anna, what are you thinking? Where are we?
Where are
all,
we? Such a
and what else do we
question.
need to cover?
Yeah. I mean,
Avoiding burnout.
Yeah, let's go there.
yeah.
I think I should tell our listeners we're recording this 2-part episode in one sitting at the end of everybody's workday. So we are
On
not
different time
practicing what we're
frames.
about to preach. You
Yeah,
know,
we're
like,
going
don't burn
loopy.
yourself out. Like we are burning ourselves out now.
This
in
is
the
almost
name
2
of PD.
hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think like you mentioned burnout, and we've also talked about being gentle with yourself. The most important thing with reflective practice for me is speaking to ourselves as a good friend would speak to ourselves when we're reflecting. And also accepting that reflection can't be another thing that just we latch onto and have to do. It makes us more stressed and anxious, right? That's all for me on that.
I often tell myself something my mentor teacher told me when I was at my first student teaching experience was with kindergarten. So I remember her telling me, remember, right now is not your time to shine. Right now, you're an apprentice. So take little bite-sized steps and deal with that, because eventually you're gonna shine. As I've developed as a teacher, and again, this is the whole lifelong learning practice, that every year you're sort of an apprentice at something, right? And celebrate that. Celebrate the things that you're about to embark as an opportunity. There are challenges. You're not going to have the answer, but maybe you don't need to have the answer every time, and you don't need to solve it. But look for the things that are worth honoring. If you had a hard class, if you had a hard semester, I'm having a hard year. Who isn't, right? Celebrate that you got through the day. Celebrate that the student was able to give you a complete sentence. Celebrate that your full lunch wasn't interrupted. Celebrate that someone found what you shared was useful. Those things help to avoid burnout. It is important to honor those moments.
Especially as teachers working in this field where we do experience compassion fatigue. We have to really make sure that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can show up for our students. So just again, that sort of taking a holistic look at what you're doing and remembering that being a teacher is just one hat you wear. You are more than your profession.
Yeah. And I would connect to that too. So going back to the idea I said earlier about like, hey, make sure that you, if you're going on the walk, if it's just not a teaching related thing, give yourself hobbies or interests outside of the realm, right? So whatever it is, hey, I want to learn how to play guitar, right? I am terrible at it, but it's not about being good at it. It's about having an interest to pursue. Or, and this one's super important, I can't say it enough, make friends with people who are not teachers and do not want to talk about teaching. I have a couple of bar buddies and we always have great conversations and they're totally unrelated things. And it does help me from not burning out because I'm connected to other parts of the world in other ways. And so even just ensuring that you're doing something about that, proactively doing it. I mean, there are websites like meetup.com is still out there, or some of these ones out there where it's like, hey, I'm interested in playing board games. I don't have any friends in the area, but there's a group that meets up. I'm going to go meet up with those people, right? So I get it too. It's like, hey, I'm a shy person. I don't want to jump out and do these things and meet a bunch of strangers. But at the same time, it's like you recognize that like once you meet strangers, maybe you're okay with becoming friends with one or two. It might take some time, don't get me wrong. But all I'm saying is like, what are you doing? What are you being proactive about in order to protect yourself? That is, like it or not, that's our responsibilities individually. We need to figure out ways to make sure that we are connected to the fullness of the world and not just the lens that we normally look at it through, which is teaching so often.
I love that, Brent. I'm saying that as my partner is a teacher. And at first it was really exciting. I was like, yes, someone gets me and I can talk about assessment. And then really quickly I realized like, well, we talk about teaching too much, right? And so you do have to carve out that space. I appreciate that advice, Brent.
Yeah.
My wife is like, I don't care. I don't care what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We're so grateful to Brent and Ixchell for modeling vulnerability and joy for teaching in this conversation.
We hope this episode reminds you that reflection isn't just about improvement, it's about connection, care, and honoring your growth.
That's right.
Listeners, we want to hear from you. What strategies do you use to reflect on your teaching? What tools or tips have helped you sustain reflection over time?
And if you're a reflection newbie, or at least you haven't carved out a practice for yourself yet, let's get you started. We challenge you after your next class to record a 60-second voice memo. Just say what surprised you, what challenged you, and what you'd do differently.
Sounds pretty easy to me. Reflection doesn't have to be polished, people. It just has to be honest. And that's really how you're going to get the most out of it in the future.
Before we go, we want to highlight a few resources you can use to help spark inspiration and sustain your practice.
First, check out our YouTube playlist, An Introduction to Reflective Practice. It's a compilation of all of our episodes related to reflective teaching.
Yes, and it features two of my personal favorite episodes. Episode 28, A Holistic Approach to PD with Ramin Yazdanpana, and 56, Building a Sustainable PD Practice with Yulia Karchenko.
Those are my favorite of the bunch too, Anna. We've also created a few reflection tools over the years to help you figure out how you reflect best, including an interactive quiz and a quick start guide with some targeted, thematic listening you can do with our previous episodes.
Lots of resources, lots of reflecting, all of it on our show notes.
If you found this episode helpful or inspiring, please share it with a friend or colleague and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.
If you're feeling generous, you can even support the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thinkaloudpod.
Thanks again to our friends at the DIESOL Podcast for this collaboration. So much fun.
Yeah, and here's to many more.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Teacher Think-Aloud podcast. Until next time, friends, happy teaching.
And happy reflecting.